Greetings gardeners, it's Marcus Laub here, your local food hub coordinator. Today we're going to talk about weeds and weed management. First things first, if you look to my left here, you see an example of me being on top of my weeds and managing them properly. When you look over here to my right, you see me not paying attention to my weeds and what happens. The garden area that I farm here was fallow for a couple decades prior to my turning the soil. And so there is literally millions and millions of seeds that I have to deal with constantly, every season. And so the best remedy for this is to be on top of your weeding and weeding regularly. One of the techniques that I use, if you look over here to the left, is actually tarping my beds. And if you see here, this is in the act of actually killing back weeds that grew over the winter. And if you look to the right here, this is where the tarp was. I just pulled the tarp off of there about 2 weeks ago. So really what it's doing is, this is just a plastic silage tarp that I got from local farms here. And I cover up the beds and it just kills back the weeds and makes my life a lot easier in the spring. It also heats up the soil and keeps the soil dry so that I can get in the garden as early as I want, which this year with all the rain, it was a real big bonus. To keep weeds at bay, you want to be regularly weeding. I once heard a farmer say to me that his goal with weeding is to bend over as little as he can in order to avoid hurting his back. This tool here is called the stirrup hoe, and it is basically the key to keeping weeds at bay. I run this through my entire garden weekly, and I have very little weed pressure in the middle of the summer. The tool is pretty simple. I'll show you right here. It's just like any normal hoe. You just drag it along the surface like this, and what it does is it just cuts the top of the weeds off from their root systems. And on a dry, hot day such as this, the sun will bake the weeds and you're good to go. So instead of going down like this and be pulling out all these individual weeds, I simply pass this hoe across the ground once a week. I pick my day, it's Monday. And even though it doesn't look like it right now, by the middle of the summer, I've got the weeds entirely under control. An important part about weed management is also what you're watering. When you do overhead irrigation, whether it be through sprinkler systems or by hand, you're watering the plant, but you're also watering everywhere around there. Drip irrigation, such as what I have here, this is drip tape, and it's all on a timer. It comes on, I put it really close to the plants, and it just simply drips and puts the water right in the soil. So it's not watering the paths, it's not watering anywhere else. So that's a great technique for not helping encourage weeds. Another technique that I don't use here, but that a lot of other farmers do, is using landscape fabric. They actually lay it out in rolls, and it's essentially this. And what they're basically doing is they're laying it around the base of their plants, such as this, but imagine it in a long row. And they put the irrigation underneath it, and then there's basically no weeding taking place. They either bury the side of the landscape fabric or they use something called landscape pins. But when you go to a lot of the small scale farms, the 1 acre style, the ones you see at market, a lot of them are using this landscape fabric in order to cut down on their weeding time, and it greatly reduces the amount of work you put into weeding. Last but not least, one of the most important things in your garden is not allowing the weeds to go to seed. Not everyone can be on top of their garden all the time, making sure that it looks perfect. It doesn't need to look perfect, but you need to be careful. When these weeds mature and flower and start to go to seed and the wind picks up, all the work you did is for naught, because it's just going to blow the seeds all back into your garden. So that's a really important thing, and it's a lot of people might want to even think about trying to clear out as many of the weeds even around the perimeter of the garden to avoid it. In this case, I'm surrounded by fields, there's nothing I can do, so I just focus on what's in the garden. Anyways, good luck out there.